Welcome to the Mary Mavis Show, the show that focuses on remarkable results and your personal power. Here is your host, Mary Mavis.
Today, I have an exciting guest with me, Dr. Marilee Adams. She's an award-winning author and pioneer in the fields of inquiry-based coaching, leadership, and organization culture. Dr. Adams is the originator of the question-thinking methodologies. She is CEO and founder of the Inquiry Institute and a consultant for organizations large and small. She teaches practical courses that transform individual effectiveness and team and organization culture. Dr. Adams is the best-selling author of Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, 12 Powerful Tools for Leadership Coaching and Life, as well as The Art of the Question and Teaching That Changes Lives. Her book about coaching and leadership, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, is an international bestseller, having sold over 400,000 copies in 22 languages. This book is the work that we will be discussing today. Let me also tell you that the fourth edition of her book and a new workbook will be out on August 23rd, and you can pre-order copies on Amazon and other book-selling platforms right now. We have provided links in the show notes. In addition, there is a link to the choice map that she will share with us today. It is also very fun to note that Marilee and I have heard about each other for years through our mutual friend, Karen Kaufman, who was my guest in season 1. It's this podcast episode that has finally brought us into conversation. Welcome to the show, Marilee.
Well, thank you, Mary. And I'd say it's about time. And
Yes.
Thank you also for saying Marilee and Dr. Adams, because we're having a conversation today.
Yes. So let's start with your journey.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about, give us some context for how you came into this work on questions and changing lives.
Well, it's been a long journey. I think I'll kind of make it shorter. But I have a background in psychology. It's where my degree is, and I practiced for 25 years, and I worked this material, what I was doing, and I was simultaneously running public workshops, which Karen might actually remember. And during the workshops, I started to discover that there were different models of what it really means to be effective and satisfied and happy. And as I remember, there was a moment in a workshop where I had taken a flip chart and drawn a line down the middle and put effective on one side, ineffective on the other. And effective turned into learner mindset, and over the years, and ineffective turned into judger mindset. And so that took me into the world of mindsets. And then because I was really fascinated by language, which is different than language is, but language,
Right.
I started wondering, how do these two different models show up in language? And I asked people in a workshop, and it turned out that learner mindset, which is our more open-minded, accepting, creative mindset, that when we're in learner, we typically ask a lot of questions. And when we're in judger mindset, which we all have both, but when we're in judger, we tend to ask fewer questions and less useful questions. In fact, questions that can be hurtful to ourselves or others. And so that recognition started me on this journey, which eventually led to writing a psychology textbook. And then my brother, who's a businessman, told me he couldn't get through the textbook. And I had this
Academic writing.
Right. And I said, well, this isn't going to do, because by then I had discovered how useful the material was. I wanted it to be widely available. And so that led to writing Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, which is a fable and very accessible. and also has practical tools at the end. And I have been thanked thousands of times, literally, for putting it in the form of a fable that made it easy for people to get the concepts and the practical how-tos. And I know that that works because it's in 22 languages and because I've presented the material literally all over the world, which is one of the great pleasures and privileges of writing a book that works for people.
I agree. And I think one of the fabulous things about the book is exactly what you said, which is you have this fable or this story that pulls you in and has you relate to the challenges that human beings have.
Right.
Not just the people in the story, but also in the back, you have so many resources for people to use. And I've been using them with the people that I work with. So I'm loving the work. Take us a little deeper into the judger-learner mindset and tell us about how that shows up in organizational life.
Oh, I could talk about this for many hours. First, I want to go back to the book for a moment to note that our hero, Ben, is on a leadership journey and he's floundering as a leader. And then his executive coach teaches him all this material, which is transformative for him. 2 chapters in the book are about Ben's relationship with his wife. And it was really important for me to put that in because I wanted people to realize that this is a book that for our whole lives. And yes, many organizations and government agencies use the book. And oftentimes the feedback I get, sometimes privately, is, oh, this was the best course I ever took. It's changed everything, etc. What I'm happiest about is I have a better relationship with my spouse or my adolescent or my in-laws. And so I think it's important to remember that every place we go, we take our mindsets with us, we take our thinking with us, we take who we're being with us. And so this material allows us, and I use it myself all the time and expect to forever. It allows us to have more choice about who we are, how we show up. And that matters at home, in our communities, and of course, in our organizations. So that gives you some context for the usefulness of it.
And I think that to embed a new way of thinking, a new mindset, and some new skills, it's so powerful to be practicing them in different parts of your life, whether it's organizational or whether it's your relationships, early or later in life. It so much makes it more a part of who you become.
That's for sure. Let me give you, sometimes people will say, what's the big idea? There are actually 2 big ideas here. And then I'll go deeper into learner and judger, which is what you asked. So one is recognizing mindsets. And when I first wrote this, the textbook came out in 1998. There was very little about mindsets. Now there's a lot. Some of it's good, some of it's not. But it's this particular model of mindsets, learner and judger, has proved to be so useful for people because they recognize it intuitively. And of course, we all have both. So I'll return to that in a moment. The other big idea is in the world of questioning. So partly it's in interpersonal questioning, questions I ask you, you ask me, we watch other people ask each other. Of course, that's vital and also vital for leadership and teams. And there's a twist in this work, and that's what I call question thinking, because part of the discovery here that's made this have such traction is that literally we think with questions, even if we're not aware of it. So what we typically think is a thought is actually a statement, but actually prior to that, we've asked questions that we may not be aware of. And those questions, the way we answer them, it's internally. And then the way we speak and act and the results we get are related to that. So if we go back to mindsets, and then I'll show you an illustration called the choice map, which has the mindsets on it. We all have both mindsets, and we always will. And that's the way it is. People tend not to like or want to recognize that they have a judger mindset, but we all do have judger mindsets, and we always will, because it's neurologically based. That part of us, which in the world of emotional intelligence and neuroscience is called the amygdala, that part of our brain is there for our survival and protection. It's often triggered by fear, as many of you know, various kinds, but we need that. So first of all, we can't get away from it because it's neurologically hardwired. Also, we need that. It's useful to us. We all also have a learner mindset. And so our learner mindset is more creative, it's more accepting, it's more open-minded, as I said. Judger tends to be more critical, closed-minded, looking only from its own perspective. And it's interesting, I'll mention something about conflict, because leaders and teams need to deal with this all the time. And I use this material a lot in teaching mediators and people who do ADR, alternative dispute resolution.
Right.
And this model turns out to be incredibly helpful for them. I've even spoken, to all the mediators in the FBI and the Navy, and they use it too, because it's such a normal way to understand ourselves, at the same time as it provides ways to up our personal power. Because when we recognize we're in judger, and of course, I mean, recognize non-judgmentally, then that liberates us to step into learner mindset, where we're more solution focused, more creative, more related.
Yeah, I love one of the quotes in the book that I wrote down is when two people are in judger, which happens a lot. I mean, I was using some of the work in this book with two of my clients who are very senior executives who have been working on a more productive relationship with each other, and get in judgment of each other and get stuck. And they've done a lot of really good work, but they found themselves at a place where they'd fallen in the pit together, the judger pit. And the quote is that when two people are in judger, the one who wakes up first has an advantage. So that's a real call to action, right? So there's a positive advantage. I love your word, your phrase, personal power. There's a positive advantage to knowing when you've fallen in the pit, and to bring yourself back out.
Absolutely. And the advantage you're referring to is once you release yourself from judger, then you can actually see better. Judger tends to have tunnel vision, right, and learner tends to have peripheral vision. Well, in any particular situation, and particularly as leaders, we need to have peripheral vision, because you need to have all the information, even if you don't like it. When we're stuck in judger, we're stuck looking this way, which means automatically we're not as powerful, even if we think we are. So let me show the choice map.
Perfect.
And I'm going to also describe it, because I know some people will not be looking at the visuals here. They'll be listening. So the choice map is an illustration. It's in all of my books. And I'm showing it, I'm holding it up so people can see it. And what you're looking at is two paths. One is the judger pit, the judger mindset path, which, as Mary just said, lands us in the pit. Many people make jokes about the judger pit and how muddy they get. And I think the term judger mess is something that's not technical, but very understandable, like your two leaders. And then, so that's the judger. And then the learner path goes up and off the page. And the reason it goes off the page on purpose is because we can really only create new thinking and a new future from learner mindset. When we're in judger, we tend to just repeat.
Right.
There are figures that are on both paths, and they're thought bubbles above their heads, and they all have questions in them. But the questions on the judger path, and these are thinking questions to ask ourselves. So on the judger path, and remember, we all do this, the questions are more, who's to blame? Whose fault is it? What's wrong with them? What's wrong with me? Because we're focusing outward and inward. And
right.
And then it can end up with, well, why bother? And that's easy to sink in the mud with that one. And the learner questions are very different. They're expansive, and they have people look for solutions, look for assumptions, which is a critical thing for teams and leaders to do, to look for possibilities, to look for action that's going to be meaningful action. And so remember, it's moment by moment, and the choice map says that we choose moment by moment, which also makes this a mindfulness tool, by the way. And so moment by moment, we get to check in with their mindset. And if we discover we're in judger, which often is the case, then we can choose to ask a switching question, and take the path here. And a switching question could be, am I in judger? Ask non-judgmentally, of course. Is this what I want to be feeling? Is this what I want to be doing? How else can I think about this? Which requires that you take in the other person's point of view. What possibilities are there? Those questions by themselves often can take people out of the pit and up to learner. Sometimes that happens very quickly. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. If we're very upset and very in judger, we could have a lot of cortisol, the stress hormone, running around in our bodies. It takes a while. But people find the choice map often like instantly illuminating. And that's why I really encourage people to go down. You can download a free copy of it at my website. And we made it free because we want people. Frankly, I want to paper the world with the choice map. I want it at the end, and I might even get there.
I think one of the things that I want to emphasize in what you talked about in terms of the judger mindset and the questions that you might be asking, when we think of somebody being in the judger, you might think of them as being judgmental only about other people. Mm-hmm. But what you're saying is that for some people or in some circumstances, the judger might be about their own selves, that frequently, I'm not good enough, or I've really messed this up. So that kind of questioning, when you realize that it's driving how you're operating, mm-hmm. is really powerful to take a look at.
Powerful to take a look at, because when you're aware of it, you can do something about it.
Exactly.
And what I like to say to people, we only are stuck when we run out of new questions to ask. Right. So the more we can be in learner mindset, the more we can ask new questions, then the more possibilities we have.
So talk a little bit about the observer, mm-hmm. because, you said, how you have to have awareness. And I often talk to my clients about observing themselves as well as others, or earlier today, talking about you've got to be able to notice when I didn't call it a judger pit, but it was about something else, but notice when you're in that behavior, mm-hmm. Before you can make a change. So how does someone hone their observer?
Over time, with intentionality, and I think building an observer self is absolutely critical for our development as adults, our development becoming more emotionally intelligent, which, as your audience knows, is so important in leadership. And in fact, leaders and people who are more emotionally intelligent are more successful than people who have high IQs. But we develop our awareness by intention. And awareness also requires honesty with oneself.
Right.
So I just acted in a way that I didn't like, or I was really upset with myself about something, and I need to step back and be a little kinder. And I think it's important that we build our observer, not just of our thoughts, but also somatically of our bodies, because very often our body gives us signals about what mindset we're in long before we become aware cognitively. So why is my jaw tight, or my stomach feeling weird, or just that feeling that something is not right? That's worth paying attention to, because then it can lead to a whole set of questions about what's really going on with me in relation to this person or this situation. And I'm being judgmental. It's important for everybody to understand that when I say judger, I'm not referring to good judgment or evaluation or discernment. I'm thinking about judgmental. And judgmental is inherently critical. And one of the dictionary definitions is we are aiming at, we're hurtful to ourselves or others when we're judgmental. It's a good habit to get over. We'll never get over it altogether because we're hardwired for it. But the more we can observe it, the less we're captured by it. And that's what makes that so important.
So in the story, in the book, in the book, one of the things I think that you did masterfully is to really take us into the thinking of the person who was getting the coaching, and in track with this, process of being resistant, thinking this was a bunch of baloney, to all of a sudden opening up and seeing himself and what the impact was. And there was a huge impact for him if he didn't make some shifts. So I love that because it is human. And this was a very successful person who was up against a situation that really called for some new ways of operating.
And like many people, he is very, very successful technically.
Right.
His people skills, his social skills, not so much. In fact, poorly. And you can't make it as a leader without good communication and social skills. And that's where his development needed to be at work and at home, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. So in the book, in the book itself, and also in the back, you have 12 questions that will sort of open things up, the learner questions. Give us sort of your top 4. What are the things when we get stuck and we find ourselves judgmentally? What are the ones that you most go to?
One is, what am I assuming? I'm assuming, because, and that's really one of the most important things for us human beings to be asking.
Right.
I also like to ask, what am I responsible for in this situation, and how might I have contributed to the issue?
Right.
I also ask, what do I want really? And then what are my goals for myself, the other person, and the situation? And then a really important question is, who do I choose to be in this moment? And that's a question you really can't get away from.
So they bring you into opening to see what's going on, being more intentional, I love I think on the 12 questions, what do I want is the first question, which I think is so important. Like, what is it that I want to have happen here? And what is happening? And then how do I need to be different? How could and how could I have contributed to this?
Right. And it's important when you say, what do I want? Particularly in a leadership situation, what do I want for myself? Also, what do I want for the other person that I'm in conversation with? What is the impact that I want to have on them? And hopefully it's one that's empowering. And then what do I want and need to happen in the situation? Because leaders need to be thinking at multiple layers simultaneously. And then the way that we think as leaders is going to unfold in the way that we feel and the way that we relate, and also the way in which we encourage people around us to ask questions, which is really vital. Shall I take it to teams for a minute?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so I showed you the choice map and the different places that we end up depending on the mindset. And this is drawn as one person's mindset. But I also use it frequently with teams. And I ask a question that almost always has people laugh. And I say, have you ever been on a judger team?
Right.
And everybody laughs because they know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't have to explain it. They know there's going to be finger pointing and blaming and not taking accountability, and nothing gets done. And then I say, have you ever been on a learner team? And mostly they'll say yes. And they know that people are listening to each other. They're being respectful. They're together and looking for solutions. And all I have to say is, what are the differences? What do you want? And how can we develop the skills here individually and as a team of collaborators to enhance learner and to decrease judger? And I've literally worked with the team for 9 months. It was a very judger team. And at the end, they were a very learner team. And it was all based just on the choice map.
Oh, wow. Well, because if you ask yourself, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
It can't be finger pointing.
Or even,
it's not going to be that I would like to have a team that gets to know answers, that, it's whoever speaks loudest. It's that the boss of the team leader always makes the final decision, because we never have anything innovative or new to propose, or we never shorten the timeline to get our project done. Right. So nobody wants the outcomes of a judger team,
or the experience for the most,
or the experience.
That's really for sure. I do want to say something about the research in high performing and low performing teams.
Great.
A really good piece of research, Fredrickson and Losada, when they studied very methodically high performing teams and low performing teams, 60 different teams. And their conclusions really pleased me. So I'll report them.
Yeah.
So they discovered that the high performing teams, not surprisingly, had much more positive emotions. They also found a really good balance between inquiry and advocacy.
Right.
A really good flowing balance. The low performing teams had a lot of negative emotions associated. High advocacy, low inquiry. And you could imagine that this is, I'm going to call it judger advocacy, because if it were learner advocacy, it wouldn't have that downer impact. But I thought it was really useful to see that these ideas, which people think, oh, well, this is just the soft stuff. These are social skills, to which I respond, this is a little of a sidebar. But when people put down social skills, I say, oh, are you talking about the success skills?
Right.
And if I really need to push in the point, I say, soft skills equal hard cash.
Well, I think the soft skills, I always say soft skills are actually the hard things to do.
That's true.
So I mean, it's much easier to learn a technical skill than it is to learn to engage with people in a way that creates innovative ideas.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about what did make the distinction between, a learner advocate. What does a learner advocate do rather than a judger advocate?
Well, let's start with judger. Judger advocacy is sort of my way or the highway, and they're just going to punch in their point, and they aren't going to listen to any questions that might actually deepen their effectiveness. So a judger advocate, I'm going to be extreme about it, is pushing for their point of view. They make a lot of assumptions about their accuracy, and they assume they're right, the other people are wrong and shouldn't be listened to. And they can actually, at the extreme, flog other people with their ideas. Right. We're going to do it this way. I know it's the right way. And they don't entertain questions.
Yeah. If you were smart enough, you would agree with me.
Oh, that's good. I like that one. And I've done enough of this work in even intelligence agencies where you might think they shouldn't have, but that's really where you should be asking questions and where you should be inviting lots of people to say, well, what are we assuming? What haven't we thought of now? Please play devil's advocate because it will make my thinking better. Right. That's really what you want. So learner advocacy falls along those lines. You say, this is my point of view. This is how I came to it. I've collected a lot of alternative points of view. No, you're getting into the decision-making process too, because sometimes people are advocating for a decision where they really aren't, the other people don't actually have decision-making power.
Right.
I'm not talking about that. I'm advocating for this. Here's why. What do you think? What might I be missing?
Right.
And it's go ahead.
It's so interesting because I think that is that's a powerful way to go for anyone. Mm-hmm. But when you think about people who don't have the positional power to advocate for their point of view, so they're not going to ever be the final decision maker. One of the things I would always work with people is to be a strong in their advocacy, to have their information, like you said, here's what it's based on. But what you're saying is a really powerful way is then to say, but what might I be missing? Mm-hmm. How do you think about this? So in the influencing world, it's a great strategy, right? Because you draw them in by asking them how they're responding or how they think differently.
That's accurate. And I think it also brings up another important point about leadership. So we tend to think of a leader, he or she, sort of at the top. But actually, how I think about it is people lead from whatever seat they're in.
Exactly.
And sometimes people have very strong influencing leadership, but they may not have the power, but they may have tremendous impact. And so I want everyone to think like a leader, to own the situation as a whole, to think about their impact, to listen to other people's points of view. It's so important. And of course, then you're also tending to the leadership pipeline, which will be positional at some point. But there's something very powerful about holding oneself as a leader and responsible for the whole, regardless of what the actual position or title is.
And I think so many people think of leader as you have to be the team leader. So I always think about it as leadership with a small L.
Well, that's really good. I like that.
And every person in every organization, from the least authoritative role to the role that has the most authority, can be a leader or not.
That's true.
Right? You can create things, can build relationships that become influential, whether you're the receptionist or whether you're the CEO.
Maybe especially the receptionist.
Yes, exactly. That's a very powerful position. So I know you and I have talked about this. When you're speaking with people in a team, how do you speak to create learner ears?
Well, let's define that first.
Good.
So we talked about mindsets, judger mindset, learner mindset. We all have both. A vital part of communication, let's think about communication, is thinking, speaking, and listening.
Right.
Listening, in a way, is the hardest because thinking and speaking, you can attach words to it. Listening is more challenging and maybe certainly as important. So if we are listening with judger ears, I like to do it like this. We're listening with judger ears. We're just listening to ourselves and any judgmental thinking that's going on, but the other person doesn't really exist. If we're listening with what I call learner ears, and those terms are in the book, we're actually listening to the other person. What are they saying that's important? What might I be missing? That same question again.
Right.
What point of view do they have that I haven't thought about before? And so I like those phrases because they're so normal and people just get it. Like, oh, judge your ears. Okay, I got that. I know what it's like to talk to somebody who listens to me with judge your ears. It's not fun or productive, and I don't want to talk to them again.
Right.
But listening to somebody with learner ears, there can be a really genuine, caring, connected, productive conversation. And putting it in the context of organizations, the more productive our conversations are, the better the culture is, the better the outcomes are, and the fewer mistakes that are made. And mistakes, of course, end up being costly, either financially costly or opportunity costs, or just, I often talk about learner cultures and judger cultures, and you can see how that would fall out. A learner culture is going to be more productive. It's actually going to have better results and less rework.
Mistakes or delays.
Right.
Things take longer when the communication isn't effective.
Exactly. I mean, I can talk for a long time. I love talking about this stuff. And it's fun to talk to somebody who lives in the same world, who has the depth of experience that you do, Mary, because, you have a listening for what I'm talking about that makes this fun for me.
Yes. And in the focus of the work that I'm doing now, being this middle of the organization, it's such a powerful time to really hone these skills, to use your positive intention to build relationships. I mean, you can build relationships by making sure you move yourself into learner mode when you find yourself in the judger pit. That's a powerful relationship builder.
I love working in the middle, as you described. Sometimes, maybe often not so appreciated, but I've always found that this is a generalization, but people in the middle are more open and really demanding of growth and development and a real pleasure to work with. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes people very high in an organization tend to be more judger. Well, I already know all the answers. I've been there, done that, seen that. But you know what? In this world right now, which is so complex and getting more complex, been there, done that doesn't do it because we have to be in the moment asking new questions. And in fact, I said this in like leadership keynotes, but I'll say it to anybody, that the antidote to uncertainty, which Lord knows we're living in a lot of uncertainty, the antidote to uncertainty is inquiry. Because we have to be saying, in this moment, what's real? In this moment, what are our challenges? In this moment, what are our resources? In this moment, even though we can't predict what's likely, and then act into that. So inquiry and learner inquiry becomes a vital, vital skill.
Yeah, and two key messages that I send to these amazing people in the middle who are so open and so eager and so thoughtful about who they are is A, you have to be accountable for what you create in the organization. You are the owner creator, which is the phrase that I'm using.
I like that.
And so you can build the skills and you can make things happen and you can create the relationships. Don't be waiting for the organization or your boss to do it for you. And then the other thing that I've been really thinking about is that the managers and bosses of these folks in the middle, particularly the ones that are in their 30s and early 40s, they should be moving into the learner mode and inquiry mode and, opening up mode instead of, having every conversation be very tactical or business oriented, because they have a lot to teach, a lot to share with this group.
And I like to think that leaders, for me, the characteristics of a successful leader, whatever their title is to have the attitude of empowering the people around them, of teaching the people around them, because they'll be better team members, better colleagues, more likely to ascend in the organization, and it all works out better, rather than being a leader who wants to have all the power, keep all the information. That's not very pleasant and may have a short shelf life.
So we've covered a lot of ground, and I believe very strongly this is important work for all of us human beings to learn and to hone over time. Is there anything you want to leave us with as we close the session?
Well, certainly go get the choice map, because it could be really useful. And like in the story, you could post it on your refrigerator, take it to your office. People keep it in their cars. They put it in the classroom. I wrote a book for educators. It works just as well. So get the choice map, and think in terms of great results begin with great questions. And by that, I mean great learner questions, because that's what opens things up and is inclusive and honors other people, their ideas, their suggestions, and almost invariably leads to better relationships and better results. And that's what leadership is about.
Perfect place to end. I'll also remind people that there's a link in the show notes for the choice map, as well as a link to pick up a pre-ordered copy of the book and or the new workbook. So thank you so much for spending the time with me today, Marilee.
Well, it was a pleasure, and it's wonderful. I love talking about leadership. So thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Today's show was produced by Eric Aubrey. Our theme music was written and produced by Eric Aubrey and Tim McKinstry. The show's graphics were designed by Devin Marciano. Remember to subscribe to our podcast on Google, Apple, or Spotify. You can also find episodes at maviscompany.com, where I invite you to sign up for my weekly newsletter. I hope you use some nugget to help you create remarkable results in your world. Thank you for listening.